Assemblyman Augustine.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. An interesting afternoon thus far. Interesting that I'm coming on the heels of a request for us to take an allegation as gospel and to act on the allegation as gospel. When Madam Presiding Officer, Tobago knows that this Chief Secretary has an uncanny ability to give every single man an opportunity to prove themselves. In fact, Madam Presiding Officer, if I operated based on just allegations, then perhaps the member for Roxburgh Argyle would not be in this house. If the people of Roxburgh Argyle voted based on just allegations, then the member for Roxburgh Argyle will not be in this house. And I find it quite incredulous that the man who said, "Don't judge me based on allegations, wait until I get a chance to prove myself," is today saying, I must make a decision on another member based on allegations only and without substantiated evidence. Madam Presiding Officer. Madam Presiding Officer.
Please sit. Both parties.
I said to judge the man based on his work.
That's actually not a standing order, Mr. Duke.
What? Will I be okay?
Assemblyman Augustine, please continue your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. And I guess some people decided to come into this house without preparing at all. So you come and you bluff your way through. What they say, VOPs, VAPs, Vodam, Vadam, hoping to connect on something, Google a definition, hoping to make a point, and end up being more incoherent than Minority Leader number 1. But allow me, Madam Presiding Officer, to begin by pointing out, perhaps generally and specifically, how projects, and in particular projects over the Division of Infrastructure, are done by this administration. In the first instance, the projects under question, the way they are handled is that the division came to the Executive Council, as other divisions will come to the Executive Council from time to time, bringing an idea, a concept, project that is to be done by the division. The Executive Council sits, considers the idea, the project, the concept that has to be done, and then the Executive Council says, go ahead and execute, or sometimes the Executive Council will say, hold, wait, or sometimes the Executive Council will say, no. And that's because we are attempting to practice a habit of the Executive Council not being the final arbiters on which contractor gets which contract. Because if we use a reverse method, and that has been used in the past, in fact, the much talked about a project that led to over $100 million in works, in fact, well over $300 million in works over a 3-month period. Those were done in reverse, meaning the Executive Council sat and located in some of those Executive Council minutes were the actual contractors to be adjudicated on by the Executive. So I want to carry Tobagonians through the process. So the division comes and the division says, if we are going to do Juve through Crown Point, it will be great if there are alternative routes to the airport, because we don't want to block the carriageway, especially given the anticipated size of the Juve. And so the division attempted to see if they can have roads parallel to the main artery running down the center of Canaan, Bonaccord to Crown Point. So that presumably, well, arguably, someone will be able to access the furthest end of that part of the island using roads on the left and the right. On one of the roads, the one passing through, that they wanted to do passing through the Friendship Estate, that did not get started at all. And Tobagonians must appreciate that Tobago has been talking about a road to go through Friendship as a bypass to the airport long before I was born. I don't even know if my father was even thinking about it. I don't even know my parents were together and doing rudeness yet when Tobagonians were conceptualizing that road. And here I am, many years later, grappling with a very small capital development budget, and now considering that this is a road we ought to do. And of course, the executive said, but if we do this road, it will really help with traffic management for the carnival. And I'm told, because I wasn't in the Juve, maybe the minority leader was there, but I'm told that some bands never even got all the way to the end of the line. They got stuck along the main artery. So if the division was able to successfully complete those two roads, then the hiccups, the intervention with the traffic trying to get to and from the airport would have been minimized. Unfortunately, the division has been unsuccessful with both of those projects. The one going through Friendship did not get beyond tendering process, and so was never awarded. Was never executed. My apologies, was never executed. The one going through attaching from Milford Court all the way around, that got started and remains incomplete. Then there was another road that was brought for the executive to consider. Granted, I want you to pay attention to the process. The division brought the projects to the executive approved the projects, and the division's staff does the procurement. You should start. Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. So I was just pointing out the project matrix. The division brought the project concept to the executive for approval. The executive approves, and the division staff executes the project. Then we look at the road in Scarborough, the road that some will love to hate, but that many, 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 many Tobagonians have grown to love and appreciate. And that's a project, Madam Presiding Officer, where in 21 days, not 21 months, and not 21 years, in 21 days, 2 bridges were built. I want to understand that some will deliberately try to mislead, talking about it just being a slip and curb and just a slab over a drain. Some opposite have made a point, and I see the member for Roxwood Argyle, in his usual fashion, lays allegations and disappear from the house, right? But notwithstanding, 2 bridges were built in that period of time. 2 bridges, one by Scarborough RC, one at the side of the Port Mall car park, to be able to connect effortlessly coming from Montgomery all the way to Dutch Fort and out. And I can tell you, Madam Presiding Officer, I used that road on Carnival Sunday in October. And no, I wasn't going to Carnival. In fact, I was going to Victory Outreach Church that is located over at Sangsters Hill. And the members of the church community in that area, that included the Pentecostal Church, People's Pentecostal, I think it is, the one with Pastor Frank, the one by Victory Outreach, the Good News SDA people, they all met with me as Chief Secretary to ask if I am sure they will be able to get to and from church in the middle of the carnival, because they did not want to disrupt the actual church and worship sessions. And so to say that that road was not used or wasn't useful is to be untruth about the reality of that road. In 21 days, in fact, it will appear, Madam Presiding Officer, that this administration could do in 21 days what they can't do in 21 years. And maybe it's a case where a year for a PNM is 1 day for this team in terms of development. 21 days, that was done. Then there was a road at Argyle that started but incomplete at the time of the October Carnival and is on its final stage. I also used that road during the October Carnival. In fact, I used it on the night there was a major fete at the Sid Gray complex. I had to pass on that route coming from Speyside. And because that road was incomplete, it was a traffic nightmare getting through there because it was incomplete. I use it again during this carnival because while some was waylaying themselves, having a good time, I have no problem with that, not judging anybody, I took the time to visit all the camps I could find on the island. And so I had to use that road because on Monday when I was trying to come from Speyside, I came from camping Bloody Bay, came through to Charlottesville to Speyside. On my way down, the bands were somewhere around FCB Bank in Roxborough. And so I had to reverse, go over Station Hill, and use that road. And because that road is nearing completion, there was not a traffic nightmare in Roxborough during the February Carnival as occurred in October because of that road. So the question about whether these roads were useful and necessary, that doesn't come into play. They are useful, they are necessary. But the member, the minority leader, sought to cast aspersions and sought to ridicule the Secretary for Infrastructure, claiming that, some of the things look improper, they may be improper, and in some instances, he said, they were improper. And I find it unfair, Madam Presiding Officer, that the same person who says these contractors involved and exposed by the audit that I commissioned when I came into office should continue to work with the THA until they are proven guilty, is also saying the Secretary for Infrastructure must be removed before being proven guilty. I want you to see the juxtaposition, and I want to put it in this house, Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer. I want to put it in this house that some of those same contractors fingered in the audit exercise I commissioned have and continue to work with the THA, this THA. As a matter of fact, I want to also go on record to remind the island that I never call the name of any one of the contractors. I see people jumping out their own skin. It's not as happen when you choke crack on, yeah, foulers find it. And some of those jumping out their skin have done work by this administration, have received payments in the tune of millions from this administration for work done during this tenure. During this tenure, they ain't gonna tell you that. And some will not tell you that they even do bad work. Let me put it this way, they even do bad work. Try to put down Gabion basket, do retaining work, and one bit of rain and it wash away, no footing, all of that. And I could put it on record as saying, when matters like that came to the Executive Council, and some felt, look, we need to probably put the contractor on blast, we need to not pay the contractor, or tell the contractor to go from here. My position was different. My position was, find a way to help them finish the work. Give them a blight to finish the work. The same contractors, some of whom try to drag my name, notwithstanding the fact, to this date, I have not called the name of a single contractor fingered in that audit exercise that I commissioned. And let me park parenthetically to say this. That I have been more cautious about the wrapping up of that audit exercise.
Member.
Yes.
Leader of Assembly Business.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I beg to move that this House remains seated until the Chief Secretary has completed his presentation.
Members, the question is that this House remains seated until the Chief Secretary has finished his presentation. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All against? The ayes have it. Continue, member.
Thank you. I was at the point, Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, where I was pointing out, just as a sidebar, that those fingered in have been very careful about how I treat with the final audit report, which I can advise this House is completed. And the reason for that is that I got the opportunity to see what happened with the report on firearms from the central government. And then when I look back all the way to the Scott drug report, I get to recognize that if you're not careful, you will have the report with all the evidence and you can't lock up a single soul. And so I will not talk out of turn about that report at all. I ain't even give other members of the executive a copy of the final report. All Tobagonians will see will be action on that report. Yes. So this administration does not need to blacklist anybody. The law will treat with people accordingly. End of story. End of story. But I wish to let Tobagonians know that some of these same contractors, those who bartalk the chief sec in public square, some of those same contractors have been in receipt of contracts from this administration, have been in receipt of payments from this administration for those contracts. And furthermore, Madam Presiding Officer, some of those same contractors, in some instances, have either done shoddy work or incomplete work. And we try our best to assist them. Look, case in point, we try our best to assist one of them with completing work to facilitate the movement of people who are to be put off for the airport that they're building. And I wonder if that airport was a prime example of bid rigging. All this academic exercise, that might be a prime example of bid rigging. Where only one tenderer end up as the tender at the end. Eh? Twice. But then again, we have one of those contractors that I think that should be complete in date. Correct, Secretary of Infrastructure? Yes. We paid every cent up to date. Notwithstanding, after paying every cent, locate it. And we sit down, and perhaps some will say like fools, waiting, being patient, saying, oh gosh, finish the contract now. The people need to move. We don't want to have to block the road. We don't want them to try to break people down, and we have to intervene as a THA. And why am I talking about it, Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer? Because this motion like several motions in the space, have been prompted by some of the corrupt 1%ers from this Tobago space. Yes. Some have been about the space saying to key members of this house, show me your motion. And some members of this house just whining left and right to their tunes. And how do I know that, Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer? I know that because I could say for a fact, one person in the space had the audacity to even say to me, look, if you fire the Secretary for Infrastructure, or you'll get financing for the next election. And I am at the point of saying, but even if you are to finance any team I am to lead, your money is not sufficient to control Tobago's business. It has to be the people that manages Tobago's business. That's what democracy is about. That's what democracy is about. Further, Madam Presiding Officer, I want to speak to this attempt to tie this matter into this talk of Trinidad contractors. And the member for Roxburgh Argyle just spoke. And you know, sometimes there's a principle that says that 2020 vision is hindsight, or hindsight is 2020 vision. Because I listened to the member for Roxburgh Argyle, who clearly cannot tell the difference between recurrent expenditure and development, who clearly doesn't understand that CPEP and URP workers don't get paid or salaried out of the 300 million capital development funds. Only those workers that are seen as development workers. And in principle, development workers, quote unquote, should remain until such time as the development project expires. But we know we have kept them beyond that. And they are good as permanent now. But CPEP and URP workers that you're referencing, they're not being paid by development expenses. Furthermore, he attempts to quote how much the THA have for URP and to suggest that we should be using the money to pay more URP and CPEP workers. Maybe he should have spoken to the council on the other side, because she would tell him how much the THA does really spend on CPEP and URP, and that 18 million and 10 million is not the figure, and that we already more than triple the number that we have budgeted for. And then there is this attempt to say, well, they use all of the capital development money to do these projects. Well, if that was the case, how did education get to do their projects and to pay the contractors? How did tourism get to do their projects if we had used the entire 300 million to do that? In fact, I would tell the house, I could tell this house that even with the road down in Smithfield, they didn't get a cent yet. The first payment, I think, should be sometime in April. He said they didn't get not 1 cent yet. The one in Moriah that they're referencing, and you see, hypocrisy doesn't always come with memory, eh? Because the road in Moriah, the work that was done on that road in Moriah, the first part of that road was done by a contractor, contracted by the team that the minority leader campaigned for. And that contractor was from South Trinidad, who did that first work. And not only that, when the thing came up for tender to do the rest of the work that resulted in removing the steps and so on, in fact, the work that the division did, the rest of the work was more extensive than what the division had planned to do from before. Because what the division had originally planned to do was to prevent the land from going down in the gully, in the deep ditch in the bottom. The division did that, plus gave the people road access, driver road access. And when the division did the tendering, I'm advised that the same contractor that was contracted from before, that was from South Trinidad, tried to, well, not tried, he made a bid again, and because he just didn't want to negotiate, someone came in lower than him, and that's how we lost that contract. And you know what? If this administration had gone back with the same contractor, they would have still stand up in the public square and say, they're giving contracts to contractors from South Trinidad because there is a desire to be mischievous with how information is used. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, it didn't work through 2 elections, and it's still now work today. And I want to go further because, and it's not that I am comparing PNM with this team, because if this team ever behaves like the PNM that run this island for 21 years, I will disband the team myself. But history is important so you can point out people's nefarious intent when it comes to some things. Because in this house, we have conversations today about contractors from South.
Member, you have 5 minutes of speaking time.
Sure. In this house, we have conversations today about contractors from South Trinidad. But they ain't gonna tell you that people like Foster Cummings was getting contracts from this THA prior to us. And not only that, and I'm talking about tens of millions in contracts from different companies under different names. They wouldn't tell you that people like him did work that the THA pay for, and the work ain't good because the building falling in on itself down in Scarborough Sec, and it had nothing to do with land shifts, but poor construction. They wouldn't tell you that the administration just before us that we did the market, that the contractor that did that work was from Trinidad. So Tobago wasn't good for the $40 million to refurbish, not to build a new, the $40 million to refurbish the market in town. Tobago wasn't good to get a contract. Victor E. Bruce, out of which I operate from now, had to move my meetings to Shaw Park. I'm real sorry for the workers. I wish I could move the workers too. The building leaking like ever. From the day one leaking, water running through where the light bulbs are, the AC and working, the regulator and there, right? And the minority will rightfully say is your problem now. But the truth is that Trinidad contractor had them hire to do that work because they feel to be able to Boko integrated, same Trinidad contractor. The fishing depot in Shellaville, same Trinidad contractor. The fishing depot in Castara that we only now start to use, same Trinidad contract. In fact, that was from Cummings and Associates too. And I could say it outside because I had the evidence. So I don't have to mask it on the parliamentary privilege. I have to say it outside. So, Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, when they come and they try to make a distinction about where the contractor in Trinidad comes from, it's not because they want to make a distinction about what Trinidad contractors getting versus Tobago contractors. It's that they're trying to raise up ghosts of Hilton Sandy Pass and hoping that it will work. But Tobagoans are more mature than that now. We're smarter than that now. And so, even with the presentation of a report from a QS, and Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, the members of the media asked me, they said, but there is this wood slave of a political leader that says that he will send you some documents. And every day the media asking me, he sent the documents yet? He sent it yet? He sent it yet? And the answer is no, because I'm waiting on the documents. Because I don't operate just based on allegations. I operate based on evidence. And I made it clear in the House last year. I'll make it clear again. And I want Secretary James to listen to me carefully. Right? The same way I made it clear to the member from Roxborough, Argyle, who is no longer part of this team. I'll make it clear again. Should evidence surface, documentary evidence surface, that you are a part of or a benefactor from any corrupt activity in any of these projects or any other project, you are gone. I'm not even calling her to tell you I'm sending you. You're just going to see somebody show up to take your work. Simple as that. And it goes to everybody here. And I want to share a WhatsApp message that I got, right? I got a call in October last year. The 31st of October last year. The person said, well, the person said that Secretary James involving corruption, I need to get rid of him. This call came from somebody quite in Trinidad. So when the person called, I said to the person, in fact, I write to the person, I said, now if there is a serious matter of corruption in the awarding of contracts by the division, I want to know. I want the documentary evidence so I can act immediately. So don't hesitate to share. It will also mean looking to remove those in procurement, because I ain't going after secretary alone, because clearly if there is corruption, it can't be the secretary alone involved. And coincidentally, if there is corruption, it must involve.
Your time has expired.
Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, I beg to move that the member be given an additional 10 minutes of speaking time.
Members, the question put is that 10 minutes of additional speaking time be given to the Chief Secretary. All in favor say aye. Aye. All against? The ayes have it. Member, you may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer. Thank you, members. But I was just making the point that people have been coming and whispering the things. And I said, but I can't discipline a member on whispers. I could discipline a member on documentary evidence. I am letting my opponents run the ship because they will run it in the ground. And that's what they want to do. And so it is without fear of any contradiction that I will join with the councillor and with the Deputy Chief Secretary in also saying, look, if you have this body of evidence that you claim you have, that link, maybe you could see a contractor send money to the secretary. I don't know if he's having a Camille Robinson moment. Maybe you have evidence that he and that contractor was involved in some way or form prior. Maybe you have a photo of him in the procurement room. Maybe you have him on record, on tape, doing something. I will love to have it. I'm going to step further than the Deputy Chief Secretary, who said we could pause and allow you to go to the police station. In saying to the minority leader, I will accompany you there. I will accompany you there. I will. Because that same principle, that same yardstick, I hold out for those opposite. I hold out for members of this team. I want to, before I close, respond to this notion that somehow the organizational structure of the division, and I'll take it by extension, other areas in the THA, somehow is just being disrupted for no reason or being illegally disrupted. Everything I do and everything that this team does is done in accordance with Act 40 of 1996 and the powers assigned to the Executive Council of the Tobago House of Assembly. We have procurement officers throughout the THA. And I think I heard, and the minority leader could correct me if I'm wrong, I think I heard some insinuation by the minority leader in another space that there may have been corruption that happened under the party that he represents in the past. And if I'm wrong, I'll be happy to take that back. It's wrong? Right? He says that's wrong, so I withdraw that. I withdraw that. But, Madam, Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, there have been assertions that there were corruption and corrupt activities under previous governments over the last 21 years. In fact, the Auditor General report will suggest that a lot of that happened. The Auditor General report will suggest those things happen. And unfortunately, they did not have chief secretaries like me who take such a hardline approach against secretaries. And when I hold things against secretaries and former secretaries, I don't hold it so well that they can't win court cases against me either. Because I know what I'm doing. And despite those assertions, in fact, not even assertions, despite the well-known fact that corruption has happened previously, the minority leader is saying that all of the procurement officers that have been in the space as they were set and established by P&M Executive Council, that they must just remain as is, and there must be no shifts. Let me tell Tobagonians how those procurement officers get there. None of them could be their procurement officers without the approval and authority of the Executive Council, and it was P&M Executive Council that put them there. Every one of them are contracted employees. That's the reality. And I'm saying, Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, that for the Tobago House of Assembly to become more efficient, there have to be some organizational shifts. There must be some. Having organizational shifts doesn't mean that there is corruption. Having a shift in how the business is done doesn't mean that there is corruption. We will all admit here that there are inefficiencies all over, that there were instances of corruption all over. Recently, and I'll help the minority leader out in letting him know that the Auditor General's office is here. In fact, they wrote and indicated that they want to do the first fiscal year, the fiscal year that just ended. So that will include everything that Secretary James did. So you are very much saved some time and energy about calling them, because they are being welcomed with open arms. Welcomed. And I'm certain I won't have to answer questions like what people are asking me now about land purchase and no deed and all kind of story by THA previously. I'm sure about that. I'm sure about that. I'm sure about that. But I want to reiterate a position that I've held and continue to hold, which is, if there exists evidence of corruption, and evidence of corruption does not reside in fake profiles being run by a former chief sec who had nothing to do with the time. That's not where evidence comes from. If there is documentary evidence, I, Farley Chavez Augustine, want to see it. In fact, it was promised publicly. I didn't see it come yet. And I checked my emails up to this morning. I didn't see it in my mailbox anywhere, and I'm waiting on it. But if there's evidence of corruption about anybody in here, there wouldn't be a need for a motion of no confidence to prompt me to remove anybody. There wouldn't be a need for a motion, because that action will be taken. That action will be taken. Because unlike the people we replace, who have a political culture of never firing anybody, never prosecuting anybody, political bodies that is, successfully, this is not the political culture of this team. It's not. And today is unfortunate that we use the House to lay allegations bare, to diminish people's record, and I know why. I know why. You see all them lovely videos that you'll be seeing, and all the people who complaining about how long they're waiting on this kind of development? That is triggering all of this. And they have to find a way to hit back where the success is. As a child, and still so today, one of my favorite fruits is mango. I like all kinds of mango. The only kind of mango I probably don't eat is the one that is called beefy. I just find it just look big and obzocky. But I eat all kinds of mangoes. And as a schoolboy, I have had many close attempts at a bus head because you're pelting mango and you're standing under the tree at the same time because you just want to get that stubborn mango that is the rosiest out on that limb. I even fall off from tree trying to pick mangoes out on that limb. Why am I drawing that analogy? Because we don't ever pelt a mango tree when it's barren. It must have fruit on it. It must have some fruit on it. And we pelt the mango tree. We don't pelt mango tree when the fruit sour either. Because if you know the mango and tastes good, you ain't wasting time with it. You might make chow with it. You might feed pigs with it. You go give a gripe, you ain't fighting up with it. You go hot your belly. You ride your chest. But when the mango is sweet and the mango tree is laden, that is when we just stone it. And I have to wonder aloud, Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, if this isn't a case of stoning a fully laden mango tree. The minority leader will have an opportunity to wind up the motion. He will have an opportunity to talk to me during the break if he wishes. He will have an opportunity to bring documentary evidence. He will have an opportunity to prove the case of collusion, bid rigging, corruption, which still have not been proven. In fact, what he has presented to this House, if they are taken to the
Member,
it won't result in any action.
your time has expired.
And I'll be happy to give way to the minority leader to do the necessary. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer.